Welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Jasmine. I am a fantasy romance author, writer, and this is my third video into my writing journey. So this is a video I was a little bit hesitant to make, mainly because we are going to talk about my failure. And who really wants to talk about the mistakes they made in life? It's really daunting, but I think it's really important to share with you my writing journey, but from the very beginning. So if you don't know, I am currently in the process of republishing my very first book. And I say republish because I did end up publishing the very first book in the series back in 2021, and it flopped completely. It was a failure. But let me take you back and explain how that happened. So I started working on this series back in 2018, 2019. I started to shape the beginnings of the series, and at that time I had no idea I was going to write a series. I was kind of only focused on just writing the first book and getting it out there. And I remember the very first ideas of the series were the characters and a little bit of the world. I started fleshing out the characters, writing their descriptions, and then 2020 hit. And during quarantine is when I really doubled down and I worked and drafted and wrote the crap out of this book. And at that time, I still remember the gratifying, amazing feeling of having finished the very first draft and just feeling so accomplished. Because I see this fact getting thrown around social media all the time, how everyone has an idea for a book, but the percentage is really low for the people that actually sit down and write the book and let alone finish it. So when I finished my very first draft, I was just filled with such an accomplishment, but I knew I still had a long ways to go before I could actually publish the book. So I ended up writing 2-3 more drafts, if I remember, and then I tried to edit the final draft as much as possible on my own. And during that time, I was so ignorant as to what the publishing process was really like. I did some research, I even found a list of things that needed to get marked off before even thinking about sending samples of my book out to publishing houses. And it wasn't until then that I realized that I needed money in order to have this book professionally edited as much as possible before sending it out. And I was very hesitant because obviously during that time, it was so difficult for everyone around the world. So I ended up making the mistake of taking the edits into my own hands and self-editing my final draft as much as possible. And I thought I was done. And when I'm talking about self-editing, I mean, I took it upon myself to do the developmental edits, the line edits, the proofreading, and even the formatting. I do remember the formatting was pretty fun because I ended up hand drawing one of the creatures from my book and adding it to the chapter covers. So that was really fun, but that was just a huge mistake. But at the time, I thought I had completed my very first book. So can you guess what I did next? I ended up writing my first letter to send to all the publishers that I had listed down in my notebook, and I prepared my very first chapter to send off with a letter. I ended up sending my first chapter and letter to about, I want to say maybe like 60 different publishing houses. Now that I look back on it, my future self knew this was going to happen, but my past self at that time had no idea. And guess what? I got 0 acceptance from any of the publishing houses that I sent my letter and first chapter to. Right now, thinking on that, I'm not sad. It's exactly what needed to happen because I made the huge mistake of self-editing, but at that time I was devastated. It really got me into a slump. I thought that my book just wasn't good enough for the big publishing houses, which it wasn't at that time. And so I decided to try self-publishing. As you can see from my social media, I tried to promote the crap out of this book. All these videos are from like 2020, 2021, I think. And I tried to follow the trending sounds, whatever video trends. And don't get me wrong, I did gain like a very small audience for the book, but I don't know, I just feel horrible having to let those people down because this book was definitely not up to par. And let me tell you this, self-publishing, becoming an indie author is a whole other ballgame as to just sending off a letter in your first chapter to publishing houses. Becoming an indie author is definitely a process that I was completely ignorant of. I needed to have done way more research, way more research into what it takes to become an indie author, because if I'm being honest, indie authors, they have to worry about marketing their book on their own, which takes so much work, and there may be days where it's hard to find the motivation to do so no matter how much you love your book. And at some point, I've even seen indie authors become small business owners, inspiring and amazing, but but it definitely opened my eyes that being an indie author takes so much work and dedication to your craft. I was not discouraged because I really thought that my book was like this gold mine that just definitely needed to be out there in the world, that I thought people definitely needed to read and love. I was so delusional back then. And sharing this with you is really scary because this is definitely an experience that I just want to shove really deep down, never to get up again. But I definitely need to share this experience in order to stress that my book will not be ready for the world to see until I have written my 10th draft, until it has gone through professional editors, multiple editors, until it's in the hands of beta readers and ARC readers. And I need to give myself time in order to do this book justice because I'm still in love with my story. I didn't see that years ago. I was so driven to just get this book out and then write the next one that I made so many mistakes along the way, and I need to admit to them. And after a few weeks of that book being published, I just fell into like this super sad, depressed phase. Like I felt like a failure. And it also didn't help that I was active on Facebook at the time, which I'm not now because that's a huge mistake. I was comparing my own life progression with other people from my old school. That only deepened my depressed phase at that time, and my mental health really went down the drain. So after that book was published, I ended up taking a break from writing for a few years, and I just focused on my day job. And it's not until now that I have found myself still loving my fantasy romance stories so much that I need to give this a real shot, but I need to do it the right way this time. So what I did is I ended up pulling my book from anywhere that it was being sold, and I'm going back, and rereading this book is atrocious. Like, I still can't believe that I published this version of my story way back in the day. It needs so much editing, and not for myself this time. I am actually going to take the time to save up and hire professional editors, like I said, because this needs to be done right. It's just a little bit scary confessing to my past mistakes to an audience that I am trying to grow with on this writing journey to republishing, but I know it needs to be done because it didn't sit right with me telling you about my fantasy romance series while keeping this secret, basically, because I want to go down on this writing journey with as much honesty as I can possibly muster to share, and I think this is the first step. It's scary. And while I will be sharing a lot more details with you about my series, I did want to share just a little bit just so that you can get a sense of what I'm working with right here. So my fantasy romance series is based in a world called Valeria, and within Valeria there's 7 different realms, all ruled by 7 different rulers, and we're going to focus on a realm called Alzula, which is where my female main character is going to sort of start off on. And Valeria is this world that is filled with magic, but the catch is that not everyone can use magic. So the people in Valeria are distinguished between ordinary and warrior fae, and I may change the terms, I'm not 100% sure, but we'll call them ordinary and warriors for right now. So the ordinary, as you can tell, they don't have any magic, they can't use magic, as opposed to the warriors who are gifted the access to magic, which makes them warriors. Now the warriors are able to choose what kind of warrior they want to be by choosing 3 different classes, and then we have subclasses underneath. So very similar to video games such as D&D, Final Fantasy, and even World of Warcraft, and maybe even other minor MMORPGs. We have the tank, DPS, and the healing class. Now stay with me. The tanks are the hard hitters. They're the ones who grabs the enemy's attention, and this is who the enemy is going to be going pow pow, basically, right? So within the tanks, I have 3 different subclasses. I don't want to go too much into detail about the classes. And then we have the healers. The healers, kind of self-explanatory, they kind of keep everyone alive. And then we have DPS. DPS stands for damage per second, and they're the ones doing the most damage to the enemy while the enemy is focused on hitting the tank. But I will keep in mind that not every single person that reads the book is familiar with the mechanics of video games, so I promise I will make it so much simpler to understand, which again I had not done in the first version of this published atrocity, but I will in this one, I promise. promise. And that's just a taste of the kind of magic system that's going on in Valeria, but it's also going to be filled with so many different creatures. I had to include dragons. Dragons are going to be part of it. There's like no way that you can write fantasy and not include dragons in some shape, way, or form. So dragons will be part of my story. But there will be so many creatures that I already have listed out in my outline here, and I think I want to try my hand at like drawing them out just to give the readers like a visual of what the creatures are supposed to look like, because I don't want to bombard you with specific details, you know, just an idea. And my story is going to start out with my female main protagonist who travels to this world in order to find and rescue her brother who's been kidnapped by an evil organization named Orphan. And from there, it's going to be chaotic. It's going to be filled with romance. I seriously can't wait, because I feel like I've written a type of romance that has me just squeezing the neck of my characters for the stupid decisions they're going to make. And it's just such a wonderful, unhinged feeling, especially when writing it. Oh God, I just can't wait for people to read this. But I promise you, I will take the time that needs to be taken in order for this book to be ready for you to read. I'm really sorry I didn't go more into depth as to what the story is about. I kind of just gave you like really quick highlights, but in more videos to come, I'll explain my characters with a little bit more detail, because I really want you to be able to establish a relationship with my characters, because they're just gonna be fantastic. #diversity. But I also need to be careful not to give away too much, because when you get my book in your hands, I want you to be surprised and excited and curious while unraveling my story. But now that I think of it, really hope that sharing my past mistake with this project hasn't put you off from following my journey as a writer, because we all make mistakes, right? I don't know. I just wanted to be honest with you. But if you made it to the end of this video, thank you so much. I really appreciate it from the bottom of my heart that you stuck it out all the way to the end. If you're interested in following my writer's journey, please subscribe, like, press all the buttons that you have to, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you for watching. Writing my first quarry. So my fantasy romance series is based in a world called Velaris.